I watched The Faculty on YouTube with ads. Does this movie hold up over 2 decades since it was released? As a fan of both horror and pro wrestling, I'm scouring Netflix, Amazon Prime, Shudder, Crackle, and so on to find some of the best and worst horror movies across streaming services to see if they are championship worthy for me to own on physical media. Welcome to Dropkicks and Tombstone. The Faculty was directed by Robert Rodriguez and released in 1998. The synopsis of the movie is, when creepy things start happening around school, the kids at Harrington High School make a chilling discovery that their teachers are from another planet. So now it's up to an unlikely collection of jocks, nerds, loners, and stoners to save the world from alien domination. Some pro wrestling matches have slow and methodical builds, while others crank up the intensity right from the jump. When it comes to matches, I prefer both ways actually. I like to see a story unfold. At the same time, I do like it when the action hits right from the start. But when it comes to movies, I have a pretty short attention span. In fact, I use the first 3 minutes of a movie to determine whether or not it is worth continuing to watch. Let's take a look at the first 3 minutes of The Faculty. It starts off with the Liquid Terminator getting pissed off at everything. He's coaching a high school football team and they're not performing as well, so he's getting pissed off at them. Usher Raymond is there and he's pissed off at Usher. And also, the star player is not doing what he should be doing, so that pisses him off. And he starts to walk off the field. And that's when he encounters a small hole in the field that is producing some water. Of course, this pisses him off. So there he goes, about to yell at the water itself, when a shadow figure comes up behind him and stands over him. And what does this do? It pisses him off. Now, we do not see who that person is, we do not hear their conversation, but you can kind of tell what's going to happen there. Now, this is a pretty intense way of starting the movie, and honestly, this is not the end of the first 3 minutes. We get into the faculty room itself as we learn that the budget is getting cut across the board, so a lot of the extracurricular activities are getting jobbed out. And of course, what does this do? It pisses off the entire faculty. So in 3 minutes, we've seen every character get pissed off. This is the recipe for a true horror movie. So it's been quite some time since I've seen The Faculty in its entirety. I used to watch this movie all the time back in the day when it was on cable in the late 90s and early 2000s. And it was one of my favorites back then. I actually liken it back to the Attitude Era, and I feel like those kind of work together in my own brain as far as things that were happening at the time. It was pro wrestling and it was The Faculty. It was horror and wrestling put together. So when I was going to watch this movie, I went in with a bit of trepidation. I had no idea if it can hold up. Just like the Attitude Era, if you go back and watch some of that stuff, it's not as good as you remember. And I was worried that this movie would have that same fate. Much to my delight, it holds up incredibly well. In fact, watching this movie 25 years later is really interesting because it feels bigger than it was back then. When you look at the talent alone that was in this, a lot of these people were just getting their start or on their way to being established, and now look at them and they're huge stars. You have Elijah Wood and Josh Hartnett and Jon Stewart and Jordan Brewster from the Fast and Furious series. And of course you have an established name like Robert Patrick, the Liquid Terminator. It's a pretty big talent pool right there. It reminds me a lot of the mid to late 2000s ROH roster, which has incredible talent across the board. Your Bryan Danielson, your Seth Rollins, your Samoa Joe, Nigel McGuinness. Endless names that are incredibly influential in wrestling today. Now, looking at the movie itself, there's a lot to like and there's a little bit of things to dislike. I'll start with the dislike here. So, the movie itself is not very original. In fact, they actually tell you that multiple times as you're watching it. They make so many references to the Puppet Masters and the invasion of the Body Snatchers to the point where you know for a fact that they're just stealing those two stories and creating a movie out of it. At the same time, this is a very interesting mix that they created because they did create a horror movie that fits right into that 90s feel, Attitude Era feel of teenage angst, and you have the teen comedy drama mixed in with horror and sci-fi, and it's done incredibly well. I mentioned the talent already, but the story overall just feels like it's fun. It's a fun movie. When it comes to effects, they do a pretty good job considering that this was pretty early CGI phase, and they did find a way to incorporate that. It doesn't feel too cheap. It feels like we're still in the beta phase of some of it. I mean, some of the monster design just feels a little odd. At the same time, it feels and looks pretty good even now. If I were doing this movie now, I would love to see this being done with more practical effects. I think that would have been an incredible feat, and it would have made this look even more spectacular. But of course, CGI is cheaper, and it was the new thing, so I don't blame them for doing that. And overall, I just really like this movie. It's a great movie altogether. I can't believe it held up so well this far out. And I honestly don't see it as being something that would not feel great watching it years from now. Like Hulk Hogan has left a lasting legacy on sports entertainment, both good and bad, I'm looking at these horror movies to see where do they fit in the Horror Movie Hall of Fame, and where do they fit in that spectrum of good and bad. The Faculty was released in 1998 on Christmas Day, and I think that's a really odd choice, and I'm not the only one that feels that way, because this was not a box office success. There was some success that came out of home theater and cable when it did come out on those platforms, but at the same time, the box office is the box office, and this was deemed a failure. Also, this is a one and done story. There are no sequels. There's been nothing that has come out about this movie ever since that release, which is kind of sad. As a horror fan and as a pro wrestling fan, I am a bit of a collector. I look at these movies to see whether or not they're worth adding to my collection. Let's take a look at to see what you were to get if you were to buy this movie on Blu-ray today. It is just the movie with a digital download. Nothing else. There's no special features, there's no commentary, there's no anything. I would love to see a making of this movie, behind the scenes, retrospective, something, anything. But unfortunately, that is not the case right now. If you were to watch this on streaming services, as of my recording today, you can watch it on YouTube with ads, or you can watch it on Paramount Plus. Either is a pretty okay option for it. Of course, you don't want to be inundated with ads, and the platform itself, as I watched it, wasn't so bad. It didn't feel like it was that disruptive. But if you want to go the paid route and watch this on Paramount Plus, this is a pretty good option as well. When it comes to streaming or owning this movie, it's an interesting case, because I get worried that when you look at some of these streaming services, if they ever go away, some of these movies job out with it. And The Faculty feels like one of those that would just kind of get washed away if any of these services no longer were active. So I would want to own this movie because it is really good, and it's something that I actually really, really like, and I would love to go back to multiple times. But knowing that it is just the movie and that's it is a little bit concerning to me. There's a little bit of good news because Scream Factory has recently gotten the access to the library of the Miramax and Dimension Films library, which is pretty big because there's a lot of great titles there. They actually released Wes Craven's Cursed in 2022, and they did a whole special edition 4K remaster, which is the treatment that I would love this movie to get. So when it comes to streaming or owning this one, it's a little bit of a different case for me, because it's a little bit of a wait and see option for me. I would love to have this movie because I would like to go and reference it multiple times and see it, years down the line, but feel like there might be something here and there is potential that this could be celebrated in the way that it should be. It should get its bigger following in a bigger release. So I'm going to hold out hope and say in some years' time, the faculty will get its special treatment, will have a special edition, and that will be something worth owning and adding to your collection.
Let's call for the bell because now we have our decision. This movie did not take a spot on the official Masters of Nonsense movie shelf. Are you thinking about getting this movie? Do you think the decision should be overturned? Let us know by joining the discussion on our Threads page and all of our other social media available on this screen. Like, subscribe, repeat. Always repeat.